Tolentino at Hontiveros mainit na nagkasagutan sa Senado dahil sa issue ng sugar importation. Mainit ang naging sagutan at supalpala ng magkabilang grupo sa Senado matapos lumutang sa Senado noong Martes ang mga bagong dokumentong umano'y sumusuporta sa pag-aangkin na kulang ang supply ng asukal na nagpabago ng tensyon sa pagitan ni Hontiveros at Tolentino sa problema sa pag-import ng asukal. Kinwestiyon ni Hontiveros ang isang seksyon ng ulat ng Senate Blue Ribbon Committee tungkol sa usapin na nagsabing there may have been an actual sugar shortage or at the very least anticipated sugar shortfalls batay sa data mula sa SRA. Ang tinutukoy ni Hontiveros ay ang isang liham na isinulat ni noong NEDA Chief Carl Kendrick Chua kay dating Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez hinggil sa supply gap ng Coca-Cola na 116 metric tons. Tumugon si Tolentino sa pagsasabing might not be aware of the letter addressed to Secretary Dominguez, which was not part of the committee report and was never discussed during the committee investigations. Nangatwiran pa ang senador ng oposisyon na ang data ng SRA mula sa nakalipas na 3 taon ng pananim at ang mga resolusyon ng mga stakeholders sa industriya ng asukal na lahat ay pinakita sa pagsisiyasat ng committee ay dapat na sapat na batayan upang maangkin ang pagkakaroon ng kakulangan ng asukal. Matapos ang kanyang naging pahayag na ito ay mas nag-init pa ang dalawang magkabilang grupo na tuluyan na ngang nagsupalpalan.
Tons of domestic sugar, there is still a supply deficit of 74,000 metric tons of raw sugar. So, Mr. President, is the good share aware of this?
Mr. President, I reiterate again. The good gentle lady never brought this to the attention of the committee during the several hearings we conducted. This just came out today, Mr. President. I could not even read that. But, Mr. President, we're giving a presumption of regularity here. This was never tackled during the Blue Ribbon investigations. We were never able to have this document as part of the exhibits. We were never able to show this to the former Sugar Regulatory Agency officials. So, if this is a newly discovered evidence, it has to be placed in the right perspective. Ano po ang gusto palabasin? Ang gusto pong palabasin, may shortfall. We agree. Ang gusto pong palabasin, meron document noong June which we were never able to verify, although again we grant a presumption of regularity here, and this was never discussed. This was never, I don't know if the rules will permit us to overhaul the mark evidence exhibits which were never shown during the committee hearings. Otherwise, Mr. President, I might be able to raise a point of order here. The committee report is the one that is supposed to be tackled here. Although the notion of sugar shortage is germane to the committee report, the document being presented virtually was never part of the committee investigation. So, Mr. President, it would be highly irregular for this representation to discuss something which was not part of the committee investigation wherein the gentle lady from Panay participated intensively, and we appreciate her participation. So if there will be other documents that will be shown, perhaps it would be tantamount to having another committee hearing when we have already adjourned, Mr. President, weeks ago. And in fact, the submission of the committee report and the 2-day rule to submit a minority report or a dissent for that matter would encapsulate the rule that everything would have to be there. So extrinsic matters, not part of the committee report, not part of the investigation, although germane, especially when it refers to documents, probably would be beyond the purview of this representation's knowledge. So the questions and the succeeding questions would be to ask me if I am aware. Mr. President, my continuing answer is that I am not aware because this was never presented, Mr. President.
Mr. President, good sponsor, with all due respect to the good chair, if the chair were to raise a point of order on this matter, with all due respect, as a member of the Blue Ribbon Committee, it would be out of order because this is not yet our final committee report. Kaya nga po ini-interpellate natin. Kaya nga po pagkatapos nitong period of interpellation, dadako po tayo sa period of amendment in order to come up with the final committee report. Kaya nga po nagko-content kami mula sa minorya to present yung mga punto ng aming minority report para sa konsiderasyon. Hindi lamang ng good chair, pero ng lahat pa po ng mga colleagues dito sa Senado. All committee reports are up for debate in plenary and indeed subject to amendment by the body. Nagpapasalamat po ako sa good chair for conceding that may shortfall. He agreed that there was a shortfall. And that these documents that I am asking the good chair about in interpellation of the draft committee report are germane. Para sa akin po, it should have been enough
Mr.
to
President,
establish the shortage, to say even in the committee report what the chair has now said, that there was my shortfall, sang-ayon ang chair doon. But since the draft committee report has not yet stated that, andun pa lang siya sa may have been a shortage, kaya nga germane itong mga dokumentong ito to show what this representation believes is already established by the SRA data of the past 3 crop years at yung mga resolusyon ng mga stakeholders, just to continue connecting the dots even in the earlier months, even from the previous administration. So, I correct myself, Mr. President, good chair, the committee report is not a draft.
yes.
It is
yes.
not yet
I
adopted
was supposed
by this
to
august chamber.
respond, Mr.
Yes,
President,
Mr.
because
President, it's not yet
15
adopted.
members signed
So
this
subject,
committee report.
yes, Mr. Chair, I have corrected myself, Mr. President, but it is not yet adopted by the Senate. Kaya nga po, nag-i-interpellate pa po tayo, papasok pa po sa period of amendments. Kaya po, pinepresenta po nitong representasyon itong mga dokumento as germane, as said by the chair, in the period of interpellation, Mr. President.
Mr. President, if I may react quickly, please proceed. If we will allow the presentation of new documents to support the contention of the lady from Panay, what would prevent another member of the Blue Ribbon Committee? Thank you, Senator De La Rosa. What would prevent another member of the Blue Ribbon Committee to present the testimony of witnesses? How would you balance the scale between a documentary evidence and testimonial evidence? Will we allow here in the plenary, as we discuss the committee report, the presentation of witnesses who will support Undersecretary Sebastian, who will rebut the testimony of Mr. Serapica? So will now be discriminating against the testimonial evidence if we will allow the presentation of documentary evidence, Mr. President? So will we allow now the presentation of witnesses here in the plenary, Mr. President, after we have submitted the committee report? Because we are now, if we will accept additional documentary evidence, we might as well accept testimonial evidence. We might as well recall Yusek Sebastian and the entire SRA board here. I reiterate again that for matters of defense, it has to be brought in the proper forum. And to put this in the proper perspective, the role of the Blue Ribbon Committee is merely to recommend that a formal investigation be commenced. by the Office of the Ombudsman or whatever appropriate body is there to investigate, and that the finding of guilt will only be made by a court of competent with competent authority and not the blue ribbon. So if the question of the interpellator refers to the authority of the blue ribbon to find guilt, probably that's misplaced.
Yes, it would be misplaced, Mr. President, if that was my question. Pero hindi po yun ang tanong ko. I understand what the good chair has said, that it is the court who would make such a finding. Nga lamang po, this representation, bilang hindi po ako abogado, ay tinatanong ko lang po yung legal opinion ng good chair. Is good faith a defense in criminal, hindi sa harap ng blue ribbon, in criminal prosecutions for usurpation of official functions? Depensa po ba yung good faith or hindi po, Mr. Chair?
It can be used, Mr. President, as a defense, but then again, the act of usurpation of authority, again, I go back to the novel term I mentioned last night, refers to the act of knowingly and falsely representing oneself as an officer with an authority to sign. So, knowingly, that is the scienter. There is an intent, Mr. President. So, if you have a defense of good faith, you have to show that you signed that without that knowingly. So, how can you do that when you sign your affixation of the signature is a known positive act, an overt act of doing something to claim that position. I don't want to belabor that point, but if Yusek Sebastian or the other persons would want to utilize the defense of good faith, nothing will prevent them from so doing.
Salamat, Mr. President, good chair. Siyempre, kung knowingly at falsely minirepresent ang sarili, kontra doon yung good faith defense na sinabi naman po ng chair, it can be used. It can be used, and knowing that you don't have the authority, not knowing that you sign. So yung sapat na po sa akin, Mr. President, na sinabi ng chair na good faith can be used, as the good chair said, can be used as a defense in criminal prosecution. And like I said also earlier, Mr. President, good chair, I will not debate the factual question of whether or not Yusek Sebastian had criminal intent. Malinaw po sa aking isip, although others may of course disagree, that just taking all the circumstances together, the fact that there was a July 15, 2022 memorandum granting him authority to sign, the fact that there was no opposition from the executive to import 300,000 metric tons of sugar when it was first broached, and the fact that the SRA board is a collegial body and the signature of the DA secretary is actually technically not required to issue a sugar order, there is enough to sustain a finding of good faith. Ang mahalaga lang po talaga sa akin, Mr. President, ay nasabi po ng good chair at nailagay po natin on the record that indeed good faith is a defense in Article 177 of the revised Penal
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President.
Just point of order. Can we have that slide replaced, because people might misconstrue that as the one being acted upon. There's a slide posted here which has been there for the last 30 minutes or so, Mr. President. Thank you to the Secretariat. Mr. President, to clarify it once and for all. It can be a defense. However, when all the elements of the offense under Article 177 are present, good faith is negated. So there are 4 elements under 177. Offender may be a private or public officer. Pasok. Offender performs any act pertaining to a person or authority or public officer of the Philippine government or any of its agencies or foreign government. Pasok. Number 3, offender performs the act under the pretense of public function. Easy. Number 4, offender performs the act without being legally entitled to do so. Dito po sa number 4, siguro po kinulang yung fourth element, so good faith can be negated. Mr. President, ang dami po nating testigo noon, kabilang po yung dating executive secretary, na sinasabi naman niya, hindi naman talaga siya, bagamat nandun sa Memorandum 15, yung pagpirma niyang yon ay hindi siya inauthorize pa ng executive. Ganon din po yung perception ni na Mr. Serafica at ni na Mr. Valderrama at Attorney Beltran na ang akala nila ay authorized nga, kaya nagpirmahan din sila. So, the elements, all the elements should be present, but here we have element 3 and 4 which are on the borderline. So, good faith can be negated, Mr. President.
Mr. President, good sponsor. Well, I see the majority leader maybe approaching, but for the record, before this may be suspended for today, Mr. President, good sponsor. For the record, akala ko hindi po lilitisin tulad ng isang korte. Wag naman po sana po ang aking hiling, wag naman po sana nating sabihin na good faith can be negated. Minsan po, kapag po yung mga posibleng inosente ay inaakusahan ng mga krimen na posibleng hindi naman nila ginawa, minsan po, Mr. President, good faith na lang yung huling depensa nila. At wag naman po sana nating ipagkait yon sa kanila dahil nga sabi ng good share din, Mr. President, hindi po tayo korte. Sapat na po sana iwan natin na good, yung sinabi po ng chair kanina na aking ipinagpapasalamat na good faith can be used as a defense dito sa Article 177 ng revised Penal Code. As I said a few times, Mr. President, in the course of this initial interpellation, I'm not a lawyer, so I do not wish to belabor these legal points, but I do this because of a more critical point I'd like to make as an advocate for Filipino consumers and Filipino workers. This disproportionately punitive response by the executive against civil servants like Yusek Sebastian produces a chilling effect and discourages officials from acting with dispatch on issues as critical as prices and supply of important household commodities. At pag ganito po, Mr. President, ang talo po dito ang mamamayang Pilipino. Mr. President, good sponsor.
Mr. President, just a quick reaction that the element number 4 never came from me. It's part of People versus Uy, GR 248566, August 4, 2021, a decision of the Philippine Supreme Court, Mr. President. And as an additional reply, Mr. President, kaya nga po tayo nagbibigay ng ngipin sa pagbibigay ng rekomendasyon na mayroong maimbestigahan at parusahan para patunayan sa ating mga kababayan na hindi naman tayo nagiging lax sa ating oversight function at meron pa rin batas na dapat sundin. Kung lahat po ay tayo ay maaawa at patatawarin na lang natin lahat, ay wag na po tayong baka pumayag si Senator De La Rosa na dating Bucor, tanggalin na yung mga padlock sa piitan. Kaawaan na natin lahat. So, kailangan po yung dapat parusahan.
Mr. President, good sponsor, definitely hindi po awa ang pinag-uusapan natin dito. Ang pinag-uusapan po natin, katotohanan at kambal nun, hustisya. Salamat, Mr. President, good sponsor.
Yeah. Mr. President, with the indulgence of our two colleagues, may we recognize our Senate President who wants to interject, Mr. President?
Maybe I can interject because if I may be allowed to interject, because that was the speech that I made and that was the source of the investigation of the Blue Ribbon Committee. With due respect to the members of the minority and of course with respect to our chairperson, I think my dear colleague Senator Risa is invoking the issue on workers' rights and civil servants. But the real issue here, Mr. President, is the farmers, which are the ones that are affected by all this sugar importation. We already know that. We've established that any sugar importation is detrimental, of course, to the livelihood of over 100,000 farmers, 1 million beneficiaries, including the farm workers, and probably about 5 million people. We have to put it in proper perspective. We in the Senate have in the past investigated things of lesser I'd say lesser, not crime, but lesser action. Here is a situation, Mr. President, wherein overeager members of the SRA immediately wanted to go for an importation when there was clearly no instruction from the President, usurping his authority by signing on his behalf. I have nothing against Yusek Sebastian. I hear he's a very good man in terms of, and very well respected with the agri sector. Ang akin lang dyan, we've investigated worse, lesser crimes. And the minority, and Senator Risa, together with Senator Coco and the other members of the minority before, investigated other issues on a mere whim or whiff of corruption. Here's malfeasance, misfeasance. We caught the hand in the cookie jar. Di ba? Natanggal. Nahuli. So, binaliktad nila. And they're saying now good faith. Tama po sinabi ni Chairman Tolentino. Kung papayagan natin sila na, we'll work on good faith, then maybe half the cases that will be filed in the Blue Ribbon Committee, including in the Ombudsman, baka good faith lang naman talaga sila. But the findings are otherwise. And the chairperson says, it's time that it will be heard in a proper forum. Let them defend themselves in the proper forum. Right? So, I do not understand why we're defending people who clearly got their hands caught in the cookie jar. Now, if they say we were misled, then the proper courts, let them say it, that we were misled to believe that the President wanted this. But coming from all sources, including them, the President never asked for this. The Executive Secretary never asked for this. He asked for a sugar plan, and what is your plan for importation? Now, now the facts have come out, ang kailangan pala 150,000 metric tons lamang. Hindi 300,000 metric tons. Kasi kung 300,000 metric tons, the country will be awash with sugar. Negros, Bukidnon, Cavite, Batangas, Iloilo, Capiz, all of them will be suffering now because of too much sugar. Kaya I think the bottom line is, let us not lose focus on our farmers. Yung ating mga magsasaka ang ating tulungan dito. May ginawa po tayong hakbang para hindi masobra ng importation. Di ba, pinaglalaban natin po ang mga magsasaka. Ayaw po natin ng importation galing China. Ng gulay, ng karne, ng manok, dahil gusto natin tulungan ang ating mga magsasaka dito. So let's not protect a few who are pro-importation, even if it is in good faith. But obviously, nakita naman po natin, may usurpation of authority. I know of civil servants who come to me and ask for help, asking pardon from the President and all sorts of pakiusap sa justice, sa judiciary. Sabi ko, hindi ko magagawa yan. Let them defend themselves. They're asking for help for mere usurpation of authority lamang. Pumirma sila on behalf of the mayor. Pumirma sila on behalf of the accountant or auditor in the town. Kulong! Ito, pumirma for 300,000 metric tons worth billions of pesos, Your Honors, of importation. Galit nga tayo dun sa money, yung peanut importation. Yung, may hiling po kami ni Senator Villar before, nalaman namin yung head ng Bureau of, Plant Industry was a former barangay captain, totally underqualified for the post, and yet, import ng import. Galit na galit kami. Gusto namin matigil yun. So na yun, naitigil na. Pero, imbis na parusahan natin, pabayaan natin, we give them a slap on the wrist. Let them explain to the proper authorities why they did such action without the approval of the approving authority.
Para naman sa inyo, ano naman ang masasabi nyo tungkol dito? Magkomento lamang sa baba at huwag kalimutang mag-subscribe para updated ka sa mga maiinit na balita sa Pilipinas. Maraming salamat sa panonood!